The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 18th webinar on the Secret Doctrine. And somebody's phone is ringing. Okay. This and all subsequent sessions will be available on makara.us under the subheading Moria Federation webinars. I'd like to make a correction. When talking to Asha about the controlling ways of India and the UK, I incorrectly stated in our last session that the UK has a first-ray soul, when in fact has a second-ray soul. It does have a first-ray personality, which ties it to India's first-ray soul. So I don't know if Asha's with us today, but I want to make that correction.
Yeah, she is.
Great, okay. Okay, as usual, we'll start by catching up with the travels of HPB and Colonel Olcott. Last month, we found them staying with the author A.P. Sennett in the northern Indian mountain town of Shimla. You may remember that they were picnicking, and HPB had produced the phenomenon of materializing a personalized Theosophical Society diploma in Olcott's handwritings from a nearby bush. And this is after just minutes before, digging out a cup and saucer from the ground. So this installment from Old Diary Leaves occurs just a few days after those incidents. It takes place in Mrs. Hume's home, still in Simla, and is one of HPB's most famous demonstrations of psychometry. So let's see, we're going to need a couple of readers for this. Maybe we could choose ahead of time. There's actually 3 pages. So let's have the first reader read the first and second page, and then the third reader will read the longer third page.
So 3 readers, 1 for page 1, 1 for page. Okay, all right. Then I'm going to
1 and 2 and 3.
Okay, I'm going to start with Asha, and then I'm going to start with, and then go to Michael Stacy. Okay.
Sounds good.
Thank you for about the England being the second ray.
Yeah, second ray soul,
and
first ray
personality.
That's right. I don't know what I was thinking. I wasn't. And because we were talking about India, which has a first-ray soul, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, they're strongly connected through their rays. Okay.
Right. The incident of the finding of Mrs. Hume's brooch, so universally known and so often commented upon, occurred that same evening at Mr. A.O. Hume's house. I shall tell the story exactly as it happened. A party of 11 of us were dining at Mr. Hume's. Of course, occultism and philosophy were the topics of conversation. Psychometry was also broached, and Mrs. Gordon, obtaining HPB's consent to try an experiment, went to her room and fetched the letter in a plain envelope, which she gave HPB to psychometrize, whatever that means. The latter held it to her forehead a moment and began to laugh. "This is queer," she said. "I see just the top of somebody's head with hair standing up like spikes all over it. I can't see the face. Ah, now it begins to rise slowly. Why, it is Dr. Thibault, of course."
Okay, go ahead.
And so it was. The letter was from him to Mrs. Gordon. The incident gave everybody the highest satisfaction, and as usually happens in this phenomena hunting business, more wonders were called for. Would not Madam B cause something to be brought from a distance? She looked calmly round the table and said, "Well, who wants something?" Mrs. Hume at once spoke up. "I do," she said. "What?" asked HPB. "If I could really get it, I should like to have an old family jewel that I have not seen for a long time, a brooch set round with pearls. Have you the image of it clear in your mind?" "Yes, perfectly clear. It has just come to me like a flash." HPB looked fixedly at Mrs. H for a while, seemed to be communing with herself, looked up and said, It will not be brought into this house, but into the garden. I am told by a brother.
Thank you, actually. Nicely read. Okay, Michael.
After a pause, she asked Mr. Hume if he had in his garden a flower bed shaped like a star. Yes, said Mr. Hume. There were several. HPB stood up and pointed in a certain direction. I mean there, she said. Yes, there was one at that side. Then come with me yourself and find it, as I have seen it drop like a point of light in such a bed. Thereupon the company rose, put on their wraps, and gathered in the drawing room for the expedition. Before we started, I put it to the company to recall all the incidents and say whether they lent themselves to any theory of complicity or leading up with conversation or mental suggestion exercised by HPB. For, I said, if a shadow of doubt hangs over the occurrence, it will be useless for us to go any further. Those present looked questioningly at each other, and with one accord agreed that everything had been fair and stamped with good faith. We went searching the garden with lanterns, for it was a dark night, and nothing could be seen. We went by twos and threes here and there, HPB with Mr. Hume, Mrs. Sinnett, and Captain M, etc. The large bed shaped like a star was found, and Mrs. Sinnett and Captain M were the lucky finders of a small white paper package with something hard within. They found it by pulling up a tangled net of nasturtium and other vines that made a perfect mat of verdure. HPB and Mr. Hume were at some distance, and I also, until the finders called out to come and see what they had found. Mrs. Sinnett handed it to Mr. Hume, who opened it in the house, and inside was the missing brooch that had been asked for. At the suggestion of somebody, not of HPB or myself, a protocol was drawn up by Mr. Hume and Mr. Sinnett, read to the company and signed by all. Now this is the plain, unvarnished story without concealment or exaggeration.
Thank you, Michael. Okay, because some of you are tuning in to these webinars via a cell phone, I've increased the font size and switched to black print on a light background for easier reading. A fresh look for a new stanza, Stanza 2. Which we began this month, starting with HPB's thumbnail description. So could we get a reader for this?
Chris, can you read that for us, please?
The stage described in stanza 2 is to a Western mind so nearly identical with that mentioned in the first stanza that to express the idea of its difference would require a treatise in itself. Hence, it must be left to the intuition and the higher faculties of the reader to grasp, as far as he can, the meaning of all the allegorical phrases used. Indeed, it must be remembered that all these stanzas appeal to the inner faculties rather than to the ordinary comprehension of the physical brain.
So let's take a look. Stanza 2. Where was silence? Where are the ears to sense it? No, wait a minute, I'm sorry. Where were I went to verse 2. We start with number 1 here. Where were the builders, the luminous sons of Manvantaric dawn, and the unknown darkness in their Ahi Paranishpana, the producers of form from no form, the root of the world, the Devamatri and Svabhavat, rested in the bliss of non-being. So if we could get, let me see here. A sec. Okay. I was hoping Michael Robbins was going to make every attempt to join us today, but he's having to move from one room to another at the conference center, so couldn't make it. He's great at reading these. So let's find a reader here for the other 5 of these verses in the stanza 2.
Carrie, can you read that for us, please?
Stanza 2, number 2. Where was silence? Where the ears to sense it? No, there was neither silence nor sound, naught save ceaseless eternal breath, which knows itself not. 3. The hour had not yet struck. The ray had not yet flashed into the germ. The Matripadma had not yet swollen. Her heart had not yet opened for the one ray to enter, thence to fall as 3 into 4 into the lap of Maya. The 7 sons were not yet born from the web of light. Darkness alone was father-mother. Svabhavat and Svabhavat was in darkness. These 2 are the germ, and the germ is one. The universe was still concealed in the divine thought and the divine bosom.
Thanks, Carrie. So the second stanza seems to be kind of like an extension of the first, using the same form of negative references. In short, the hour had not yet struck seems to characterize this stanza. Just like in the first stanza, we had not was as the sort of characterizing. Everything else is in the negatives. Both stanzas 1 and 2 describe conditions just before the dawn of Mahamanvantara, and both speak mostly about what is yet to come. So let's take a look at HPB's commentary on verse 1. By the way, Deva Matri means mother of the gods and refers to a condition before 3D space and time, in fact, much before that level. So could we get a reader for the, actually, let's go ahead and read the entire first verse and then this commentary on that. This is specifically, her commentary specifically references where were the builders, the luminous sons of Manvantaric dawn. So let's just stop there and then begin with A, the builders.
Okay, Scott, can you read that for us, please?
Yes, I'm not sure where you wanted me to start.
The builders. It's at the builders, the sons of Manvantaric dawn.
Right, okay. A, the builders, the sons of Manvantaric dawn, are the real creators of the universe. And in this doctrine, which deals only with our planetary system, they, as the architects of the latter, are also called the watchers of the 7 spheres, which exoterically are the 7 planets, and esoterically the 7 earths or spheres, planets, in our chain also. The opening sentence of stanza 1, when mentioning 7 eternities, is made to apply both to the Mahakalpa, or the great age of Brahma, as well as to the solar pralaya and subsequent resurrection of our planetary system on a higher plane. There are many kinds of pralaya, dissolution of a thing visible, as will be shown elsewhere.
Okay, thank you. So, thoughts, questions? Notice how quickly HPB shifts focus from the cosmic sons of Manvantaric dawn, shown within the upper ellipse on this chart. The 7, let's see. to the systemic sons of Manvantaric Dawn, the 7 ray lords that make up the planetary schemes of our solar logos, shown within the lower ellipse. There's a near infinite difference in scale between these two groups, though they are in some inscrutable way linked through identification. HPB tells us that esoterically, these primordial 7 can also refer to the globes of a chain. So how is it possible that these 3 vastly different groups of 7 lords can be represented by the term sons of Manvantaric Dawn? Simply because, we're told, each of these septennats perform a similar initiating function in relation to the cycle that they are a part of. This is the ultimate as above, so below. Similarly, quote, 7 eternities is made to apply both to the Mahakalpa, or the great age of Brahma, as well as to the solar pralaya and subsequent resurrections of our planetary system. Any thoughts or questions about this idea? Anyone? Okay. Let's move on to part B, which references the part of the verse that is, in the unknown darkness, in their ahi, Johanic, Dhyanic, Buddhic, Paranishpana, the producers of form, rupa, from no form, arupa, the root of the world, the Deva Matri and Svabhavat rested in the bliss of non-being. Okay, so if we could get a reader for the commentary on this section.
Yeah, Walter, go ahead, please. Oops. There, you should be okay.
Yes, B. Paranishpana, remember, is the summum bonum, the absolute, hence the same as paran nirvana. Besides being the final state, it is that condition of subjectivity which has no relation to anything but the one absolute truth, paramarthas satya, on its plane. It is that state which leads one to appreciate correctly the full meaning of non-being, which, as explained, is absolute being. Sooner or later, all that now seemingly exists will be in reality and actually in the state of paranishpana. But there is a great difference between conscious and unconscious being. The condition of paranishpana without paramartha, the self-analyzing consciousness, svadsamvedana, is no bliss, but simply extinction for 7 eternities. Thus, an iron ball placed under the scorching rays of the sun will get heated through, but will not feel or appreciate the warmth, while a man will. It is only with a mind clear and undarkened by personality, and an assimilation of merit of manifold existences devoted to being in its collectivity, the whole living and sentient universe, that one gets rid of personal existence, merging into, becoming one with, the Absolute, and continuing in full possession of paramartha.
Okay, thank you, Walter. And that was intrepid of you to get through those Sanskrit terms. Can be quite daunting. Thoughts or questions? Anyone? Here, HPB draws an important distinction between an unconscious relationship with the Absolute, which she suggests is actually like extinction, certainly, you know, the extinction of consciousness, and a conscious relationship with the Absolute, which is the fruit of the self-analyzing state of consciousness called paramartha. So that's, you know, often these terms run together, paranishpana, paramartha, but the distinction of paramartha is his quality of the ability to self-analyze, right? which the Theosophical Glossary tells us is synonymous with Svasamvedana. So we'll see if you can remember that for more than 3 minutes. It's through repetition that we, finally gain awareness of these terms. And believe me, as we keep moving through the Secret Doctrine, many of these terms will appear and reappear again until, like Manvantara, they become, meaningful words. So, any thoughts or questions about this before we
Yes.
move on?
Yes.
Mhm.
Oops. Okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead. You should be able to go ahead, Carrie.
Okay. I see another 7 here, the 7 eternities. Would you be able to say something about what that is, Francis?
You could say it's the highest abstraction of periodicity, and it's the eternities. Of course, as Joseph Campbell said, eternity is not a long time. It has nothing to do with time, right? Which is the idea of it is to pitch you beyond sequential time into the qualitative nature of periodicity, right? Now this is at the purest abstraction, and even HPB, points out the inherent what's the word, discrepancy in including that, because the very first verse of the first stanza includes 7 eternities. The mother of time, wrapped in her invisible robe, slumbered once again for 7 eternities. You remember, and all that can be said about it is that it's the highest abstraction, which eventually becomes manifest of you could say, the inherency of difference, right? That's about all I can do with that.
So perhaps the 7 eternities, when manifest, become the 7 spirits before the throne?
I would say most definitely, which are personifications of energies, right? And those energetic streams we know to be the rays. We only know them in this system, and therefore, in truth, only know the nature of the second ray with its 7 subrays. On cosmic levels, which would be this highest personifications of ray energy, you would have a purer form of the ray, which is, except for the second, is, well, actually, cosmically, even including the second, is unknown in this solar system, right? But it's the fundamental differentiation, thank you, of the 7 forms of energy, way, way, way before any form aspect develops, right? Even these 7 spirits before the throne are just that. They're spirits. They're energetic, in their purest form, the 7 energies. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's a worthwhile hypothesis. That the 7 eternities would relate, because you have to remember that again, eternity it's not about time. Because in pralaya, which is the state that's being described, it's not divided into time-based sequences, right? So, and it becomes, a bit of an oxymoron. How can you have 7 eternities in pralaya? it's this the slumbering aspect kind of conditions it. But the truth is, there is absolutely nothing but the homogeneous absolute, nothing else. You know, it's just beingness. So, you know, this beingness, and yet pralaya itself does finally end, and it does begin. So, but it doesn't last a long time. It's altogether outside of time. It only begins and ends in relation to manifestation. So it's you know, it's hard to apply a straight logic to these levels of being. Anything else? Anyone? Carrie, are you good with that? Any other, does that provoke any other thoughts? Okay, good.
No, it's lovely. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, let's see, where are we? Let's take a look at the footnote. And this relates to Devamatri, which is the great mother, that is to say, that which lies beyond time. So could we get a reader for this, please?
Pepper, can you read that for us, please?
I don't know if my microphone works.
It works great.
Okay. So where were the builders?
No, right at the bottom, hence non-being. Oops, we lost you.
See, I don't think my microphone works well.
Okay, you don't worry about it. Just speak from however you're speaking now without the mic, just because we can hear you fine.
Okay. Hence, non-being is absolute being in esoteric philosophy. In the tenets of the latter even, Adi Buddha, first or primeval wisdom, is, while manifested, in one sense an illusion, Maya, since all the gods, including Brahma, have to die at the end of the age of Brahma. The abstraction called Parabrahm alone, whether we call it Ensof or Herbert Spencer's unknowable, being the one absolute reality. The one secondless existence is Advaita, without a second, and all the rest is Maya, teaches the Advaita philosophy.
Thank you. Pepper, yeah. So non-being is absolute being. Why? Because no being confined by even the highest, most tenuous of forms can be absolute. Because the very fact of I was going to say being a being, the very fact of existence in any form, no matter how high, it's going to exclude some other part of the manifested world. Therefore, only non-being can be absolute being. Of course, this is incredibly inhibited by language. Any thoughts about this? It's actually gets right up there into one of the most profound statements in the Secret Doctrine, right? That even Adi Buddha, you know, which would be akin to the first logos, Adi representing the highest cosmic subplane, right? Even that is, you know, in one sense, Maya, right? So it's Maya is a movable feast. It's all in reference to what you're talking about, right? Okay, let's take a look at verse 2. First one's short, it's all right here. One of the shorter commentaries. Yeah. So could we get a reader for the verse 2 and the commentary together?
Can you read that for us, please, Yvonne?
Okay. 2, where was silence? Where were the ears to sense it? No, there was neither silence nor sound. not save ceaseless eternal breath, motion, which knows itself not. A, the idea that things can cease to exist and still be is a fundamental one in Eastern psychology. Under this apparent contradiction in terms, there rests a fact of nature to realize that what is in the mind, rather than to argue about words, is the important thing. A familiar instance of a similar paradox is afforded by chemical combination. The question whether oxygen or hydrogen and oxygen cease to exist when they combine to form water is still a moot one. Some arguing that since they are found again when the water is decomposed, they must be there all the while. Others contending that as they actually turn into something totally different, they must cease to exist as themselves for the time being. But neither side is able to form the faintest conception of the real condition of a thing which has become something else and yet has not ceased to be itself. Existence as water may be said to be, for oxygen and hydrogen, a state of non-being, which is more real being than their existence as gases. And it may faintly symbolize the condition of the universe when it goes to sleep or ceases to be during the nights of Brahma, to awaken or reappear again when the dawn of the new Manvantara recalls it to what we call existence.
Thank you. Nicely read. So, thoughts or questions? I love this example, actually, the disappearance of the primary elements when combined to form some substance, right? That disappearance and reappearance. Any thoughts on this? What is this? What's your take on this? You see how she's using it as an analogy for the absolute, right? Because you have, and it's kind of reversed too, because, gases are, you could say, more tenuous than water. But you have this situation where those gases cease to exist. I mean, they really aren't there. Immeasurable when you have water. Now, maybe if some of you are physicists or work with chemicals, you could shed more light on this. But just taking her example at face value, the gases are gone and water is, and she says this might give us some faint symbolization, of the condition of the universe when it goes to sleep. Any thoughts?
Yeah, we have two. Let's start with Michael.
Yeah, Michael.
Okay, I'm focusing in on what is in the mind is the important thing.
Okay.
And that brings up the laws of thought, which precede the mental plane. They are above or they manifest on this mental plane, so they're coming from a life greater than those appearing on the mental plane, to use a little analogy or something. And, what are the laws of thought? Well, in Cosmic Fire, it lists the laws of thought first as the three cosmic laws of synthesis, attraction, and economy, and under that, the 7 laws of the soul, which I find quite interesting.
Yeah. So, thought takes its inspiration, literally, from an idea, usually not directly, but steps down through ideal. And in the recognition of that abstraction, a thought form is formed. Right?
And interestingly, the laws of thought are also called the laws of creation.
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed. there, because that gives rise to the idea of the thought form. You can't actually think without creating some form. And of course, we all know that forms are also created, outer forms are created as a result of thought, but it is inherently creationist or creative. Yeah, good point.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. So, you know, she's suggesting that the apparent conundrum has to do with language, and that if we lift to that level of abstraction, that we may gain a little further insight into that. So, you know, I thought it was curious that you know, you can get so wound up in these commentaries. Wait a minute, there was another comment, right?
Yes.
Isn't that right?
Yes.
Yeah, let's hear that before I go on.
Okay, Trudy, please go ahead.
I was thinking, even if oxygen and hydrogen are not in a physical state, they still have consciousness. Every cell, every atom has consciousness. Even though it's not in a physical manifestation.
Yeah.
Not in a not the way we see it as physical. Yeah, and also the Knights of Brahma, it's like the in-breath and out-breath of God. You know, it's like in-breath and out-breath is it takes something gets created, and there is going to be a time when it's going to be finished, and then it's the in-breath, the out-breath of existence, and it continues.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, so with the in-breath, we move into the night of Brahma, which is the pralayak or pralaya period, which is, you know, where the mother sleeps for 7 eternities, right? And it's totally undifferentiated. It's only characterized by the absolute. And then once again, with the out-breath, you know, creation once again begins. But I want to address your other point, which is excellent. And it actually is what I think will tie the gaseous hydrogen, oxygen to water, which is that the inherent or innate consciousness is ever present. You know, that point of light at the center of every atom of substance, which is the one life, doesn't disappear, you know, when water comes into being. So it is in the water, whereas before it was in the hydrogen and oxygen. And it's, you know, I mean, we know this, that it's a change of form, but not a change of being. So, yeah, thanks for that. That is, you know, the quality that ties those two states together. Unfortunately, science can't use it because you can't measure that. But, you know, we know that it is. That's the universality of those two conditions. Thank you.
And then,
so, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, please, Trudy.
No, please go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say Scott has his hand up too, but I don't think Trudy was finished.
Oh, go ahead, Trudy.
Yes, yes, that I was finished. Yes, thanks.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, Scott.
There we go. I think there's the parallels through this are interesting, because when you get to the hydrogen and oxygen, they are not in the same state. They're more real because they've come together into another form that negates their individual forms, which is to say, back at the beginning, there's neither silence nor sound. It's just breath and motion. That it's neither oxygen nor hydrogen. It's just water. It's something that transcends and indicates in the same line of analogy this return to unity from any diversity.
Yeah,
so the oxygen and hydrogen
well said. That
Yeah,
oxygen and finish your statement. Sorry, the oxygen and hydrogen. What were you going to say?
nothing really more than just this. I think this state of non-being again, that they are not anymore. Oxygen, hydrogen. They've coalesced. They've returned to a sense of a unity, which is the analogy I think she's doing here, that transcends them both.
Yeah. Yeah, very well said. It's interesting that it kind of reverses, you know, the nature of the tenuity, right?
Yes.
It's odd, you know, that in this process of becoming more unified, it's actually creates a denser form. But nonetheless, I think the analogy is valid. She's using it here, I think, to mean exactly what you're saying, you know, that, you know, when we reimmerse, I should say, into group soul, for instance, the separate individual personalities act just like hydrogen and oxygen. They disappear because the identity has shifted to another entity. So it is now identified with the entity that is the group soul. It is, in fact, the group soul. So this is a very small group, hydrogen and oxygen, right? But it's a big group, covers a lot of the planet. So it's a profound presence on this earth.
And who can say what the true nature of water is anyway? It's a great mystery. I mean, we can see oxygen, hydrogen in the air, and then when it comes to water, there's a chemical change. It's a different existence here. But the nature of water is, I think, a great mystery, what it's really about. And the fact we're finding out other planets and so forth, there's something extraordinary, obviously, about it, coming from two gases into a clear liquid form.
Yeah, exactly. So tasteless, you know, probably the purest purest example of what you call wetness, or that quality which liquid exemplifies, right? It's like any other liquid I can think of has other characteristics. You know, has a taste. It's strong, it's caustic, or it's something, right? But water seems to be just the purest liquid state, you know. But we really have to go to philosophy to get any understanding of it at all, you know. Its connection with the astral plane and the cosmic astral, and it's, you know, so it's, yeah, I agree. It's interesting, and it's not by accident that she's using it here to illustrate this. Anyone else?
Yes, we have several more hands. Let's start with Carrie.
Right. Yeah, Carrie.
Interestingly, water is capable of registering thought, as we know from the photography of the Japanese Emoto, I think his name is. So we go from this, from a state of oxygen and hydrogen, creating something which is able to absorb thought and emotions. So it's really an extraordinary transformation.
Yes. Yeah, Carrie's speaking of these experiments done by this Japanese man. I can't remember his name either.
Emoti or
Emoti.
Anyway, yeah.
Right. And where what I remember is that ice crystals, which like snowflakes, which form very specifically designed shapes, are subject to people who would voice different types of emotions, you know. I remember one of them, was children screaming, I hate you, and then another was, sentiments of lovingness, etc., and that it fundamentally changed the design, and it went from harmony to chaos, based depending on what it was subjected to. It was absolutely extraordinary. One of those, I like to call rinse in the veil, where it just can't be explained by any kind of exoteric science. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, because that certainly describes, one of the qualities, this ability to receive impression.
Pepper says his name is Masaru Emoto, E-M-O-T-O.
Masaru Emoto. That's why you just have to love groups, right? They're like a super brain, right? Because somebody will be busy pulling up the piece of information or knows it already. It's just great. Thanks for that.
And then Walter has his hand up, so.
Yes, Walter.
Oh yeah, about the concept of a unification forming something denser, consider a black hole, which is a very strong physical example, or at least a physical reflection of this spiritual concept. And then, yeah, and then on a different note about hydrogen and oxygen separating from water, it's also interesting to consider the reverse of that process toward forming unity, where take hydrogen and oxygen, which are like separate beings, and then where is the water before they combine with each other? In other words, two separate beings being a hydrogen or being an oxygen is all that they know. And the whole concept of a group seems kind of alien, and the whole concept of suggesting being waters could seem scary, or like becoming it could be like ceasing to be to the hydrogen and oxygen, at least in their separate types, in their separate type of consciousness.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Walter. Yeah, the idea that it's like death, right? It's like the threshold of seeming non-being, because hey, you're not hydrogen and you're not oxygen, so it's finished. It's all over, and then it proves to be otherwise. Yeah, I love that example. That's great. Anyone else?
Yes, Joe says if we were to go deeper into the consideration, H2O, that is 2 hydrogen to 1 oxygen, equals the water molecule. We could have a better comprehension of the mystery of water. Also, to look at the geometric configurations of these when merged.
Yeah, I've always thought that, if you had the time, first become a master occultist and then become a physicist. And wow, what you would be able to reveal as a result of the combination of those two disciplines, because you would have the occult knowledge to recognize the patterns that exist in the physical world. We're just the mere physicists. First of all, it doesn't even have the framework to look for any kind of cause in the unseen realms, right? And since most occultists don't tend to be physicists, they have no way of really exploring that aspect. Right? So yes, I totally agree with you. There's always a mystery in, and inherent information in something like the composition of water, right? H2O. Thank you for that. Anyone else? Good discussion, guys. You're bringing forward a lot of great points.
That's all I see right now.
Okay. I found it provocative that
I think Carrie wants to say something.
Oh, go ahead, Carrie.
I just wanted to add that the combination of esotericism and chemistry has been quite well done in the book Occult Chemistry of
heard of it.
Besant, Annie Besant.
Uh-huh. Okay.
It also goes into the water being capable of absorbing thoughts and feelings. So it's very, very interesting.
And it predates the
yes,
work of Emoto. Yeah. Thanks for that, Gary. Yeah. So it's interesting that HPB's commentary doesn't directly address the verse, where was silence? Where were the ears to sense it? No, there was neither silence nor sound. I find it a provocative thought that silence cannot exist without sound, without the potential, that is, for making sound. Because it's just part of the isness or the beingness of existence, rather than the lack of the existence of sound. So where there was neither silence nor sound, I find quite provocative. It's just another way to stretch our imaginations toward the incognizable. More esoterically, the sound cited is almost certainly the logos, right, which means the word, which had yet to come into being. So I think that's a hidden part of this verse. Okay, anything else before we move on?
Yes. Scott, go ahead. There you go.
Yeah, okay. I think looking at the periodic table, we want to remember that hydrogen being the first element, oxygen the eighth, that these are, from a chemistry point of view, these are among the firstborn in order, 1 through 8, and 8 is the octave of 7.
Yeah, it's the octave of 1, actually.
Of 1, that's what I meant to say, the first 7 of 1, which is hydrogen. And the fact that oxygen is necessary for fire.
Right.
And hydrogen, between the two of them, and carbon and nitrogen, HBB points out these are the basic 4. And they're all in the first 7 elements, I believe. Or no, yeah, close to it. So these are the firstborn, and water, in a sense, is perhaps precedes them. We see them going into water, but perhaps they come out of water at a cosmic astral level.
Interesting. Yeah. Right. Yeah, maybe exactly. It seems like it would have to be, or, you're standing everything on its head, right?
Well, we know that happens. Which way do you count the planes? From the top up, the top down, or the bottom up?
Right.
It works both ways.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be, explored there. Like, what are the ray associations with those first elements? And does the 8th oxygen, which is also the 8 is considered to be the new 1, right? It's the if you count up from any lowest subplane, you're at that. If you start at the 1 of a subplane, then the new 1 completely embraces the plane between them, right? So it brackets that, and it's also associated with the Christ. And the very number 8 is 2 circles, suggesting two, like the new realm, 1 and then the 8. But it'd be interesting to try to associate the rays with these first 7.
It would, yeah. And then remembering 2 oxygen being 8 has 8 electrons combined with 2 hydrogens, which each have 1. You have 10. It's the decad.
There's the completion, which
that's water.
then reverses to 1, and that's and that's water. Yeah. Wow. So its number,
It's 10 and 3.
numerological.
Yeah.
Its numerological number is 1, but it manifests as both 10 and 3, which means that it also has the 7 within it, and of course the 8 as well. Yeah. That's great stuff. That's good stuff. Yes, in 100 years they'll be teaching this in the university, right? Because it's as soon as you have etheric vision, then all of this will become a science, because the numerological relation will just be clear, and and not only that, it will lead to further understanding, right? Because you'll be able to apply logic based on etheric vision, right? Which, I mean, the possibilities are just extraordinary. Yeah, thanks for that. Anyone else? This was a fruitful paragraph. Anyone?
That's all we've got right now.
That's it. Okay, that works. Okay, let's move. We'll get into the much longer B commentary on this, which references not save ceaseless eternal breath, motion, which knows itself not. So we should read the whole thing. Where was silence? Where were the ears to sense it? No, there was neither silence nor sound. And then, not save ceaseless eternal breath, motion, which knows itself not. And this gives us some revelatory stuff. So can we get a reader for starting with the breath?
Donna, can you read that for us, please? I'm not hearing her, so let me go to Helen.
Is she self-mic'd? Is self-muted?
No, it didn't indicate that, but Helen, can you read that for us, please? Okay, I'm not hearing Helen either. James, can you read that for us, please?
Striking out. Do we put everybody to sleep? Or maybe they've just gone into samadhi. Huh?
Okay, Scott, can you read that for us, please?
I think so. Starting with the breath.
Yeah.
The breath of the one existence is used in its application only to the spiritual aspect of cosmogony by archaic esotericism. Otherwise, it is replaced by its equivalent in the material plane, motion. The one eternal element, or element containing vehicle, is space, dimensionless in every sense, coexistence with which are endless duration, primordial, hence indestructible matter, and motion, absolute perpetual motion, which is the breath of the one element. This breath, as seen, can never cease, not even during the pralaic eternities. But the breath of the one existence does not, all the same, apply to the one causeless cause, or to the all beingness, in contradistinction to all being, which is Brahma, or the universe. Brahma, or Hari, the four-faced God who, after lifting the earth out of the waters, accomplished the creation, is held to be only the instrumental and not, as clearly implied, the ideal cause. No Orientalist so far seems to have thoroughly comprehended the real sense of the verses in the Purana that treat of creation.
Okay. Thoughts? Questions? I find HPB's further teachings on space insightful. The one eternal element, or element containing vehicle. The dimensionless in every sense, coexistent with endless duration. a kind of vehicle of vehicles, a causal from which vehicles can come into being, a causal vehicle from which vehicles can come into being. Thus space is the great mother, or Deva Mantri, for all is born from within it. So any thoughts about this? There's a lot in this paragraph. Let's see where I am here. Okay, and okay, yeah, I'll go back here. Oh yeah, this is, yeah. Yeah, Scott, you have something?
Yeah, I was going to say, Justin Moore always was a scholar of Greek philosophy, and I remember him saying, I think it was about Parmenides or maybe Heraclitus, maybe, one of the preeminent ancient sages of ancient Greece, saying that one of his lines was simply, motion is. And I was thinking, in terms of, well, things keep moving, and so nothing's really dead. There's all atomic energy and movement, and there's that level of it. But there's also this level we're talking about, yes, the motion she's mentioned, and that's no doubt what he was referring to, in fact. But it has its applications elsewhere. But just motion is that's it. Motion is, period.
Yeah. Well, if it's in the proem. HPB describes it as the only attribute of the absolute. Well, that's an oxymoron. You can't have an attribute of the absolute. It right. It is. So, language never works well with the absolute, but it is inherent. It is inherent to the absolute, right? Yeah. It's interesting that, let's see what she said, let's go right to it. Primordial matter and motion, absolute perpetual motion, which is the breath of the one element. This breath, as seen, can never cease, not even during Palaic eternities. But the breath of the one existence does not all the same apply to the one causeless call, or the all beingness, right? In contradistinction to all being. So this is a departure from what she said in the proem, where she said, that it was the one attribute of the absolute. But anyway.
Again, how can you have an absolute or an aspect or attribute for the absolute?
Right. This was always Michael's Robbins's problem with this idea of the great breath. In the prime, we're told this breath, as seen, can never cease, not even during Palaic eternities. But then, unlike the prime, we're told the breath of the one existence does not apply to the one causeless cause or the all beingness, right? This begs the question, how can the great breath be unceasing during pralaya and yet not be an aspect of the causeless cause? Perhaps the pralaic eternities here referenced are not the universal maha pralaya, but I don't think that's the answer here. At any rate, we have a new statement here that is seemingly at odds with statements made in the proem, to wit, the breath of the one existence does not apply to all beingness, right? Also of value in this paragraph is the clear distinction between all beingness, which is the one causeless cause, and all being, which is this highest form of Adi Brahma. Right?
So the idea here is that the breath of the one existence doesn't apply because it's within that.
I think
differentiated. It's differentiated already, and so it can't apply to the causeless cause. Nothing.
Yeah, and I also think that she makes a point here that the material aspect of the breath is motion, right? So she says that up here somewhere. Yeah, here it is.
Right.
Okay, so otherwise it is replaced by its equivalent in the material plane, motion. So it's erroneous to think of this kind of motion, or the great breath, as something that moves like we think of motion. That's something, because you have to have something in order to detect motion, right? Something's going from point A to point B. And so that's not this. This is, kind of obviously it couldn't possibly be that, because this is so far removed from any thing that occupies space moving around, that it clearly is something altogether other than that, right? It's like I come to this idea of motion as livingness, though she never says that directly. So she'll probably, come to it again in her writings. Any other comments?
Asha has a question. She says, she is saying that the breath exists in the absolute too?
Yes. Not here. She says that in the proem, right? That the one attribute of the absolute is the great breath, right? Here, she makes a statement that the breath of the one existence does not apply to the one causeless cause, the all beingness, which delineates the one existence from the one causeless cause, the all beingness. And maybe there lies the solution. But again, I'm remembering that in the proem, she equates the breath also with pre-cosmic ideation. I don't know if you remember this chart where there was this heading of all this series of descriptors of everything that referred to the great breath, and one of them was this pre-cosmic ideation, right? And there's often an equivalency made between this principle of mind and motion, right? For instance, just the name of the third ray, right? This is intelligent activity, right? The idea of motion and activity, right? But of course, at this stage, it would be just incipient or inherent, not manifest. Right? So can't do much more than that. The breath of the one existence, definitely suggesting that those two are connected, does not apply to the one causeless cause, the all beingness. So that's the new truth. And we'd have to go back to the proem and pull that language up to see if it's somehow in agreement with that statement right there. But let's go on.
We have a couple of more questions. Michael, go ahead.
Perhaps it is a test for us to go beyond our rational thought, concrete thought of what constitutes a breath.
Well, it certainly would have to be. Yeah, it can't be. I mean, there's, if you think of what a breath is for us, it requires it requires form on so many levels in order to exist, right? But if you think of breath in terms of the great out-breath and the great in-breath, which is like periodicity, and that which moves beyond periodicity, which is pralaya, the in-breath, then maybe you're getting a little closer to what she's meaning.
Yeah, so, it's really allowing us the opportunity to stretch into the abstract mind, and release ourselves from the confines of concrete thought.
Yes, exactly. Right. Unfortunately, language invariably brings us back into concrete thought. So it's the trick is to successfully translate one's higher experience, back into the concrete, at least when we're trying to communicate non-telepathically. Yeah, thanks, Michael. Anyone else?
Yes, Carrie.
Carrie.
Can you go ahead?
Yes. It's interesting that oxygen is number one, the element number one, and the connection between oxygen and the breath, therefore, in certainly on the microcosmic level, on our level, well, I can't quite see the connection, but I recognize that oxygen and the breath are very much connected. And maybe that's why she chose the example of oxygen that was subconsciously with her too.
Yeah.
I think that's all I have to say about it. I'm not certain about it, but
yeah. Well, as Michael suggests, sometimes not being able to figure it out is just as useful, because it's which is the purpose of a koan. It's like a piece of sand in the oyster, that is consciously introduced in order to create something altogether other than what one's logic can come up with, right? So you're just inherently pitched into another level of thinking, or of in this case, intuiting. Right? Okay, so we've been, where are we here? So let's go on. Next up. What's going on? Sorry. Oh, here we go. Yeah. So can we get a reader for this next paragraph?
Asha, can you read that for us, please? Wait. We can hardly hear you.
Lean in.
Okay.
Just like Joe Biden. Lean in.
A second, let me just, okay. Therein, Brahma is the cause of the potencies that are to be generated subsequently for the work of creation. When a translator says, and from him proceed the potencies to be created after they had become the real cause, and from it proceed the potencies that will create as they become the real cause on the material plane, would perhaps be more correct. Can I read that again? Just 1 second.
Yeah, go ahead. Start over.
I'm not. Therein Brahma is the cause of the potencies that are to be generated subsequently for the work of creation. When a translator says, and from him proceed the potencies to be created after they had become the real cause, and from it proceed the potencies that will create as they become the real cause on the material plane, would perhaps be more correct. Save that one cease causeless ideal cause, there is no other to which the universe can be referred, worthiest of ascetics, through its potency, i.e. through the potency of that cause, every created thing comes by its inherent or proper nature.
Okay, it's, there's some
I think
garble.
that's another sand to me, the cone thing. Until I hear you explain the process.
Well, first of all, it's a bit garbled, what she wrote, and I parsed it out, and hopefully I can add some clarity, just grammatically. So we have two statements here. The first is a philosophically incorrect translation by what HPB calls an Orientalist, which he's always dissing, by the way, since they tend to be European amateurs as opposed to the initiates from the East, right? Which states, and from him proceed the potencies to be created after they had become the real cause. Then we have HP's corrected statements, and from it proceed the potencies that will create as they become the real cause on the material plane, right? So she's relating the creation to the material level. The mistake, as I see it, is in the phrase "the potencies to be created," which HPB corrects to "the potencies that will create," right? So it's not the potencies that will be created, because the creative aspect lies in those potencies, right? So that's the correction she makes. She then makes clear that it is the potencies that are the real cause, right? Bit of a hair-splitting exercise here, but she uses this example to make clear that, the hierarchy of cause and effect is basically what's going on here. Any thoughts about this? Thoughts or questions about this? I think what I'm going to do is reread her corrected statement, which is in a way all that matters, right? And from it proceed the potencies that will create as they become the real cause on the material plane, right? So those potencies finally manifest on the material plane, but that those potencies, even though they work through builders, are the real cause. Okay. Yeah, I don't think it's worth spending a lot of time with, unless you have some burning thoughts on the issue, and we'll move on. Okay, the next statement is densely packed with Sanskrit, guys. And so I'm going to read it myself just because I practiced some of the Sanskrit, and then we're gonna parse it out because it's actually full of good stuff, but good luck getting it on the first run through, all right? So here we go. If in the Vedanta and Nyaya, nimitta is the efficient cause, as contrasted with upadana, the material cause, and in the Sankhya, pradhana implies the functions of both, in esoteric philosophy, which reconciles all these systems, and the nearest exponent of which is the Vedanta, as expounded by the Advaita Vedantists, none but the upadana can be speculated upon. That which is in the minds of the Vaishnavas, the Vaishishta Dvaita, as the ideal in contradistinction to the real, or Parabrahm and Ishvara, can find no room in published speculations, since the ideal even is a misnomer when applied to that of which no human reason, even that of an adept, can conceive. Yikes. If all the paragraphs in the Secret Doctrine were like this one, I think probably none of us, including me, would be here, right? Fortunately, paragraphs with this kind of dense Sanskrit are fairly rare in DSD. We get occasional turns, but it's rare that we have to chop our way through a forest like this. At any rate, all we have to do is slow down and take it turn by turn. So before we analyze this statement, let's take a look at the definitions of the terms that are used. All of these Sanskrit terms are used in this. The terms above the asterisk all represent sacred texts or schools of thought. The three terms below the asterisk represent concepts. So if we could get, who's if you could choose somebody that's, is Asha here? Asha, aren't you comfortable with Sanskrit? If you are, then maybe it'd be good for you. Oh, that's terrific. Could you read this? And maybe I could take a cue as to how to pronounce some of these terms from you.
Well, I think you know better. Anyway, I'll try. Vedanta, the end or completion of the Veda, the final, most perfect exposition of the Vedic tenet. Nyaya, the first of the darsanas or Hindu schools of philosophy. This school has been called the analytic or logical school. Sankhya, the third of the 6 darshanas or Hindu schools of philosophy, followed by Kapila. Sankhya divides the universe and consequently man into 25 tattvas, elementary principles. Advaita Vedantists, those who believe in a non-dualistic form of Vedanta, expounded by Sankaracharya, who taught the oneness of Brahma, or the Paramatma of the universe, with the human spirit soul, or the Jivatma. The Vaishnavas are followers of any sect recognizing and worshipping Vishnu as a sectarian supreme divinity. The Vaishnava, the chief doctrine of this school, is duality, standing in opposition to the teachings of Sankaracharya, whose system is known as the Advaita, non-duality. The Dvaita Vedantists assert that there are 2 principles in the universe, the supreme being and the innumerable multitudes of other beings, among which are mankind.
Okay, so all those are schools of thought, and then there's the Vedanta, right, which is the perfect exposition of the Vedic text. So now the next 3 are concepts. Go ahead.
Nimitta, the spiritual or efficient cause, as contrasted with upadana, physical, material, or instrumental adjective form. Brahma is known to be the nimitta of manvantaric manifestation. Upadana, in Vedanta philosophy, a cause, motive, or material cause of any kind. Vedana, undifferentiated cosmic substance, that which is the root of prakriti, natural, visible, and invisible. Or nature, visible and invisible.
Excellent job. Thank you. In fact, could you pronounce again that what I've been saying, Vashishta Dvaita, but you said something entirely different. How do you pronounce that?
Well, there's no ver. We say ver as were. That's why a lot of Indian people say very well instead of very well. Yeah, we had like 52 letters in the Hindi alphabet, and then there's all these other little curls and twists and things. I was only like 9. I was only 9 years old when I left India, so I only made it to 4th grade. But so Vasishta Dvaita.
I see. You dropped the no V's.
And the T is
so it'd be Vaishnavas, right? Vaishnavas. Vaishnava? Vaishnavas.
Oh, the Vaishnavas, right. Okay, you're looking at the one above. Okay.
Well, no, I just went to that one. Okay. What is it?
Vaishnavas. I'm just doing the best I can. I'm not,
Yeah, I know. That's good enough for us. It's just, to get some direction on this.
Yeah, we don't have the letter T. T is the.
Oh.
There's no the in the English alphabet, so.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Well, we'll call on you once in a while to, if something is just absolutely gnarly beyond belief. So how do you pronounce tattvas? You said you have no T.
Yeah.
What is it?
Tattvas. Yeah. The ver is more like a W, and the T is a thir, which I don't know, T is a thir that doesn't exist.
Uh-huh.
Okay, well, thanks. I hope there's no other Indian that will contradict me.
Well, it would be all right if there was. We're just doing the best we can. So, no problem. And thanks so much.
Can I say something funny?
Yes.
I once made a chapati for a girlfriend of mine, and they're supposed to be soft and round. And then at a restaurant, she said, "What are those crunchy things that you made, those chapatis? They're supposed to be soft and round, but I've made them crunchy, and she didn't know any different." So I was like, "Oh, So what I'm trying to say is I don't know any difference. I could be wrong.
Yeah, your connection is sort of weaving in and out. So
Oh, yeah, I'm on the laptop. Yeah, okay.
That was better just when you shifted right then. But,
Okay.
well, thank you, Asha. Much appreciated. Does anybody have any thoughts or questions about these definitions before we move back into the statement? Anybody? Okay. Now let's revisit HPV's statement. Starting at the second paragraph, I'll read my rewording of this statement. First paragraph is HPV's original. It's what we just read, right? But I just went through and I just parsed it out in what I think or I hope is more understandable. Okay. In the Vedanta and Nyaya, the analytical or logical school, nimitta is the efficient cause as contrasted with upadana, which is the material cause. In the Shankaya, a Hindu school closely related to yoga philosophy, pradhana implies the functions of both nimitta and upadana. Esoteric philosophy reconciles these systems. The Vedanta, as expounded by the Advaita Vedantists, is the nearest exponent of the esoteric philosophy. These Advaita Vedantists believe that only the upadana, material causes, can be speculated on. The belief of the Vaishnavas, the Vaishishta Dvaita dualists, concerning the ideal in contradistinction to the real, Param in contradistinction to Ishvara, can find no room in published speculations. Remember, the Vaishishta Dvaitas are dualists, right? Since even that ideal is a misnomer when applied to that which no human reason, even that of an adept, can conceive. HPB's statement suggests that these Vaishnavas speculate as to the nature of Param, which esoteric philosophy does not do. So there you have my parsing of this. I keep getting the image of an overgrown jungle, right? And quite difficult to navigate. So are there any intrepid questions or thoughts about this statement? Well, why am I not surprised? But no paragraph will be left behind. We'll make our, strongest attempt. I think one of the most important things is the relationship between nimitta and upadana, which is you have the spiritual or efficient cause as contrasted with the physical or material or instrumental operative cause, right? And then we have this example, Brahma is shown to be the nimitta of manvantaric manifestation. Okay, so if you need a takeaway, there's one at least. Okay, let's move on to, this is just further a statement on the commentary on B, which is not save ceaseless eternal breath motion, which knows itself not. It's a continuation of that commentary. So can we get a reader for this section?
Michael, can you read that for us, please?
B, to know itself or oneself necessitates consciousness and perception, both limited faculties in relation to any subject except Parabrahm, to be cognized. Hence the eternal breath which knows itself not. Infinity cannot comprehend finiteness. The boundless can have no relation to the bounded and the conditioned. In the occult teachings, the unknown and the unknowable mover, or the self-existing, is the absolute divine essence, and thus being absolute consciousness and absolute motion to the limited senses of those who describe the indescribable. It is unconsciousness and immovableness.
Thank you, Michael. Thoughts or questions about this? The statement poses an interesting philosophical thought, suggesting that Parabrahm, and by extension the eternal breath, cannot know or perceive itself, not because of some limitation, but by the very fact that it is beyond all limitation, thus beyond the singularity of finite perception, and beyond the faculty of consciousness that comprehends otherness, because there is no otherness, right? In short, it doesn't comprehend itself because it is the knower, the quality of knowingness, and the known simultaneously. Furthermore, we're told the boundless can have no relation to the bounded and the conditioned. Again, because the act of relating requires an other, and the boundless is also that other. Thoughts or questions about this? This is why the absolute is the unknowable mover, right? Not just because it is unknown to us, but rather because it is beyond the realm wherein knowing happens or takes place, right? It's not unknowable because it's beyond our ability to know. It is unknowable because it is beyond the realm wherein knowing takes place. It's really a trippy thought. Any thoughts about this? Okay. We'll move on. We get a statement here at the end of this, and thus being absolute consciousness and absolute motion to the limited senses of those who describe the indescribable. It is unconscious and immovableness. Now it's really interesting, that contrast, right? You have absolute motion being immovableness, right? Okay, next up. Can we get a reader, please?
Okay, just one second. We have a couple of, Asha says, it seems logical given what you said. In unity, you cannot know separation or duality.
Yeah, exactly. Well said. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and then you want a reader for the next part?
Yeah, next. Here we go.
Okay. Chris, can you read that for us, please?
Concrete consciousness cannot be predicated of abstract consciousness any more than the quality wet can be predicated of water. Wetness being its own attribute and the cause of the wet quality in other things. Consciousness implies limitations and qualifications, something to be conscious of and someone to be conscious of it. But absolute consciousness contains the cognizer, the thing cognized and the cognition, all three in itself, and all three one. No man is conscious of more than that portion of his knowledge that happens to have been recalled to his mind at any particular time. Yet such is the poverty of language that we have no term to distinguish that knowledge not actively thought of from knowledge we are unable to recall to memory. To forget is synonymous with not to remember.
In language. Yeah, thank you for that. Well read. Thoughts or questions? Some fascinating stuff here. HPB uses water and wetness as metaphors for cognition and beingness, suggesting that the existence of water is a reality independent of our perception of it. Whereas wetness is an attribute that requires discriminative consciousness. Another interesting observation she makes is the fact that language can't discriminate between recalled knowledge and recallable knowledge. I find that really fascinating. Right? If you're not thinking of it at the moment, and yet it's in your mind, language can't discriminate between that condition and that which is just forgotten. It's interesting. Any thoughts or questions about this section? Yeah,
Yeah, Michael has his hand up. Hold on.
Yeah, Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, the limitation of consciousness. And when we talk about consciousness, well, it's very interesting that there is such a wide differentiation of thought of what is consciousness, all the way from there is no such thing as consciousness to everything has some kind of consciousness. And that kind of brings up that all this differentiation implies limitation of some kind.
Yeah, consciousness requires duality, as has been described here, right? If you're the cognizer, the thing cognized, and cognition itself, right, then you can't be conscious of ... of anything, because there is nothing else, right? So it then becomes basically a function of duality. So at that level where identification takes the place of alignment, you move beyond this kind of descriptor of the nature of being. Consciousness is the nature of being.
And then we have humanity, which is struggling to raise consciousness from emotions to mental aspects.
Yeah, which is, a very real, legitimate use of the word, right? You could describe levels of consciousness, and I think everybody knows what that means. And for the occultist, it has a much broader and more specific, poignant definition than than it does in general psychology, for instance.
And as we're going through this process, we are becoming less focused on the little and becoming more focused in the greater, the whole.
Yeah, it's also is caught up in the difference between knowledge and wisdom, right? It's what you just said, which is the knowledge of the whole. When you apply the knowledge of the whole to just knowledge of diversity of all things, then the result is wisdom, right? It's a kind of third-rate, a second-rate movement, where you are in the realm of intelligent activity, and then experience of the unitive, or that principle which lies beyond mind, starts affecting the consciousness of just knowingness, that is, to know about stuff, right? And that very knowledge is transformed into wisdom, And so, it's also described as the difference between the schools of learning and the halls of knowledge and halls of learning, right? Where a synthetic principle begins affecting all your thinking, right? and then wisdom is the result.
It's just so interesting.
I find it to be that as well. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Asha,
Anyone else?
Yeah, Asha says, so that which is forgotten versus not to remember is a differentiation that we limited beings have. In the bigger unity, it is the same one pool of info.
Yeah, it also has to do with transcending sequential time, right? Because if you're limited by sequential time, even if you know absolutely everything there is to know about everything, you can only bring any one thought forward, one thought at a time forward. And that's ruled by the fact that you're bound by sequential time, which is, you know, another descriptor of duality, right? So you can have a serial awareness of all things, but if you're part of sequential time, if you have your existence in that realm, it can only be brought forward one thought at a time, or one idea, or one concept at a time. Whereas if you aren't bound by that, then you get into the higher realms of wisdom, which is also distinguished by the Buddhic plane, right? Which is ruled by the intuition, where you come into a state of knowingness, not through the separative object-subject orientation of the dualistic lower mind, right? Well, a lot of words there to try to explain that. And it's also interesting here that, so this whole sump of knowledge can be standing behind this second of current reality where only one thing can come forth, right? And what, you know, she was making the point, he was making the point, is that language doesn't see any difference between, or has no way of distinguishing the difference between that and just unremembered knowledge. You know, unexpressed and unremembered, you know, in knowledge, in language, there's no difference, or at least it's not expressed differently. Anyone else?
No, that's it for right now.
Okay. So let's move on. Next up. We get a reader, please?
Yes. Let me see. Britta, can you read that for us, please? I can't hear you. I did unmute you. I can't hear you, but I do see your hand is up. Nope, we can't hear you. Okay, we'll try.
Okay.
We'll try somebody else. Let me see, Yvonne. Can you read that, please?
Yes. God saves ceaseless eternal breath motion, which knows itself not. How much greater must be the difficulty of finding terms to describe and to distinguish between abstract metaphysical facts or differences. It must not be forgotten also that we give names to things according to the appearances they assume for ourselves. We call absolute consciousness unconsciousness because it seems to us that it must necessarily be so, just as we call the absolute darkness, because to our finite understanding it appears quite impenetrable. Yet we recognize fully that our perception of such things does not do them justice.
Thank you. So any thoughts about this? Here HPB addresses not only the limitation of language, but the prejudicial perspective of, quote, giving names to things according to the appearances they assume for ourselves. She cites darkness as an example. In Rule 9, from Raised Initiations, DK has given us further insight into the concept of that darkness that stands in a causal relationship to light. For disciples and initiates, let the group know there are no other selves. Let the group know there is no color, only light. And then let darkness take the place of light, hiding all difference, blotting out all form. Then, at the place of tension and at that darkest point, let the group see a point of clear, cold fire. And in the fire, right at its very heart, let the one initiator appear whose star shone forth when the door first was passed. So it's the kind of roadmap into the environment of higher consciousness. First, the group moves beyond the realm of color to the, quote, place of light. And I would, then the source of all color, place of light, source of all color, the soul realm. And then to a place a step beyond, darkness, the source of light, whose vibration is such that all difference has been transcended, a place where the third or form aspect has no hold. But even this relative darkness, a place where the one initiator can be contacted, is at an infinite removal from the so-called darkness of the absolute. So any thoughts about this? Let's go back to this statement here. Right. Talking a lot about the limitations of language, right? And also how you can be kind of sucked in by the way that we describe things, like in giving the example of unconsciousness, right? To describe that which is beyond consciousness, which is really no description at all. In some ways, you just can't take these descriptors too seriously, you know, because so often they're, you know, very inadequate. But hopefully, at the same time, we get pitched, as you know, as Michael was saying, we get pitched into a place beyond the level of these that this language was conceived at. Right? So, any thoughts or questions about this?
Britta has her hand up still, so let's see. Okay, I've unmuted you, and your hand is up. Can you hear us? Can you talk to us now, Britta? We still can't hear you.
Sorry, Britta.
Okay.
You might work this out with a headphone. Very often, headphones solve these problems. So any of you that we've called on today and we couldn't hear you, you know, you can get a headphone for like $15 that, I mean, they're really decent. So, you know, make the investment if you haven't already. And that very much often solves these kind of problems.
And I've also dealt with a couple of people who had the headphones, and they didn't realize that there was a little mic or a little button on the cord, and so they unmuted the mic there at the top of their screen, but they forgot to do the one in their in the cord. And so, you know, it's a process, and we all get used to it, and hopefully hopefully we'll get that worked out for you, Britta. And if not, you okay, good. She says she can hear clearly, so you can always type in the questions like you've been doing. So thank you there. Speaking of which, Asha says, If all manifestation is perceived subjectively by the perceiver, implying that only a limited, not unity amount can be perceived, so the consciousness perceiving has to be raised to a higher consciousness to see beyond consciousness, beyond manifestation.
Yeah, that's a perfect example of how, words don't do it. You have to go to a higher consciousness to get beyond consciousness. Something wrong here. Yeah, at some point, the concepts that are connected, or the descriptors for the word consciousness, no longer apply to the states, to those states of beingness that exist beyond this level. But they're very, very high levels, because as long as there is some form of other in your experience, you will be conscious of that otherness, right? Only when you, which is really just the highest Adi Brahma, that you are all that is, right, will the whole concept of consciousness be, completely inapplicable, right? Alternatively, you could say that as soon as you move into this quality of identification, that consciousness is not really applicable. Consciousness, as a rule, applies to the second principle, to the soul level, right? So it's a mind. The soul is sons of mind. You become conscious at that level. It's through relating that you're conscious, right? When you move into the principle of deity, the highest principle of monadic, then it's all about identification, right? Okay, it's easier to stick with the descriptor beingness or non-being when describing these highest levels of consciousness.
Did you want to go ahead and add that last bit, Asha?
I wrote, we need to behead ourselves.
Well, I'm sorry, what did you say?
We need to behead ourselves.
Yeah, yes. It's be ahead of ourselves and behead ourselves, right? It's true. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because, and yet the head center represents the consciousness of deity, or the potential of the consciousness of deity. It's the throat, really, that represents this level that we've been talking about, which is the active intelligent aspect.
Actually, this is so weird, but am I still unmuted?
Yes, you are.
I've actually got a sore throat since the beginning of this session. This is seriously true.
I've been listening to esoteric healing on tape when I drive around. And, he says that you can always go to the closest center to your physical problem to find the source of your ill. So, here you are, the throat center, active intelligence, the third ray. And there you have it, right? Of course, you can also just have talked so much that your throat starts hurting, but it's very much related to the throat center. Okay, let's move on to the next and final part of verse 2. Okay, so this is in relation to not save ceaseless eternal breath, her last statement on this, motion, which knows itself not. So, could we get a reader, please?
Walter, will you please read that for us?
Yes. Not save ceaseless eternal breath, motion which knows itself not. We involuntarily distinguish in our minds, for instance, between unconscious, absolute consciousness and unconsciousness by secretly endowing the former with some indefinite quality that corresponds on a higher plane than our thoughts can reach with that we know as consciousness in ourselves, but this is not any type of consciousness that we can manage to distinguish from what appears to us as unconsciousness.
Exactly. Well, we've been talking about this, right? We imagine, we always, you know, it's this business of making God in your own image, right? You just extend what you know and give it a kind of uber quality. You know, I'm always amused by the fact that these super beings that, you know, occur, like, for instance, in science fiction movies, you know, they're never more conscious. They're usually just stronger, thicker, you know, they can't be shot or whatever, but they usually have the same selfishness, etc. Once in a while, you know, you'll get just a taste of it, but never are the true possibilities explored of, you know, the consciousness of a higher race. And that's just because that's what we do. We extend our condition and just kind of make it an uber version of that, right? Thank God for occultism, right? Which gives us some sense of the truth beyond our own condition. Any thoughts on this, folks? We've covered this a little bit before, but always open to ideas here. Okay. We're on to verse 3 in stanza 2. So I'll read this. The hour had not yet struck. The ray had not yet flashed into the germ. The Matri Padma had not yet swollen. Okay. We get a reader for the commentary on the first part of this, which references the hour had not yet struck. The ray had not yet flashed into the germ. Okay. Reader, please.
Carrie, can you read that for us, please? You're self-muted.
The ray of the ever darkness becomes, as it is emitted, a ray of effulgent light or life, and flashes into the germ, the point in the mundane egg, represented by matter in its abstract sense. But the term point must not be understood as applying to any particular point in space, for a germ exists in the center of every atom, and these collectively form the germ, or rather, as no atom can be made visible to our physical eye, the collectivity of these, if the term can be applied to something which is boundless and infinite, forms the noumenon of eternal and indestructible matter.
Thank you, Carrie. Thoughts or questions? So even though it is still described in the not yet style, here we have our first preview of the act of creation. By the way, I think the end of the first sentence should actually read representing matter in the abstract sense rather than represented by matter in the abstract sense. Maybe wrong there, but anyway. The dictionary definition of mundane is that which is of the world rather than of spirit. As used here, a more accurate definition might be that which is substantive rather than of deity. And that substance would be Mula Prakriti, the highest, most tenuous substance of all, which stands in a causal relationship to all diversity. You know what? Gosh, you know, I lost track of the time. We've gone way over. I think what we're going to do is back up in the beginning of the next session and start here at this verse 3 again, instead of having a discussion, because we're 2 hours in now. And so I apologize if you're on a time schedule, but we need to pull the plug. And sometimes, you know, just having such a good time and all that. So thanks so very much, all of you, for attending today. This is always a joy for me to host these discussions, and I'm very pleased to have you on board with this. The next webinar will be on the 4th Sunday. What is that, the 27th or 28th, BL, of May?
Neither. It's the 26th. It's the 26th of May. You were so close.
Oh, it's just, yeah, right there, but no cigar, yeah. 26th of May, you know, which is it's going to be necessary since the conference, and I'm sure some of you are conference goers, will, you know, be finished on the 12th of May. So 26th of May will be our next time together. So thank you very much, and until then, ta-ta for now.
Good night, goodbye, good morning, wherever you all are.
Bye now.